They bulldozed my rain garden to make the neighborhood prettier, then wondered why their million-dollar home started sliding down the hill. This isn't just a story about plants or petty HOA rules. It's about arrogance, consequences, and how nature always keeps the receipts. Welcome to another true nightmare from HOA Karen Files, where the rules are fake, but the destruction is very, very real. Subscribe for more real homeowner showdowns that will make your blood boil and your property rights matter. You know what's wild. The thing that kept this entire hillside from collapsing wasn't concrete, wasn't some HOA engineer. It was my rain garden. Yeah, a patch of plants and dirt, and they bulldozed it. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's rewind. When I bought the house on Silverwood Lane, I wasn't chasing drama. I was chasing peace, a view, a bit of space, a quieter life. The house was perched on the side of a hill, just high enough that when the light hit right, you could see all the way across the valley. There was an old oak tree in the yard, leaning just west like it was bowing to the sun. Wildflowers popped up where no one told them not to. It felt like breathing. The agent gave me the usual spiel: strong foundation, great neighbors, builder grade everything. What he didn't say: that slope. It was a slow-moving disaster waiting to happen. He brushed it off, said rain was rare, said the builders handled drainage. But I've been a gardener most of my life, hiked enough hills to know when the land feels soft under your boots. And this land, it was whispering trouble, so I didn't wait. I didn't pour concrete or stack retaining blocks. I didn't call some overpriced landscaper to slap down a plastic lawn and call it a day. I got to work. Myself. I dug, hauled rock, researched native plants with roots that could reach deep into the earth and hold. I shaped the land swales to slow water, berms to guide it, flowers to bring in the bees. It wasn't just pretty, it was alive. And it worked. That first summer storm rolled in heavy, thunder like rolling drums. I sat on the porch, coffee in hand, and watched the garden do its job. No rivers down the driveway, no washed-out yard, just calm, soaking earth. It felt good. Like I had done something that mattered. At first, no one said anything. The HOA hadn't noticed. Or maybe they had, and were waiting to see if it became a problem. It didn't, but apparently the idea of it did. Because then came the comments. Mrs. Carmichael, the one with the perfect turf lawn that looks vacuumed, dropped a line at the mailbox. Some yards just look a little wild lately. I smiled, bit my tongue. Then came the newsletter. Protecting property values through visual harmony. Photos of plastic perfect lawns and trimmed hedges so sharp they could cut you. All right. Message received. I figured maybe they don't get it. Maybe if they understood what I was doing, they'd ease up. So I made signs. Pollinator habitat, rain garden, erosion control in progress. Even put a laminated QR code on the mailbox that linked to a page explaining how rain gardens work, complete with smiley bees and fun facts. I thought, okay, now they'll get it. They didn't. A week later, taped to my door. Dear resident, we have received concerns regarding landscaping inconsistencies. That word inconsistencies, it does a lot of work for a little letter. No rules broken, no demands, just a friendly reminder about standards. So I read the HOA rules, front to back, 3 times. No clause against rain gardens, no rule about plant height beyond unreasonably obstructive. I figured I was good. But with the HOA, it's not about the rules, it's about who makes them. And her name was Karen Whitmore. I met her the next week. Well, she met me, walked right up my driveway like she owned the pavement. Mid-50s, platinum hair that hadn't moved since 2004, pastel blouse tucked so tight it could hold a clipboard. She didn't smile. She just bared her teeth. Lovely weather, isn't it? She never looked at the sky. She looked at the garden. Then she started talking, not asking about community standards, neighborhood cohesion, and how wild landscaping might scare children and attract unwanted wildlife. I explained, calmly, this was a designed system, erosion control, a native ecosystem. It actually protects the land. She tilted her head, blinked slow. Then she said it, rules are rules, and walked away, not another word, just heels clicking back down the pavement. That's when I knew this wasn't about gardening. This wasn't about safety. This was about control. And Karen had just declared war. You ever come home and feel something's wrong before you even pull into the driveway? That sixth sense, the hair standing on end kind. That's what hit me when I turned onto Silverwood Lane that Monday evening. I had left for work like any other day, coffee in hand, to-do list spinning in my head, didn't check my mailbox, didn't see the note taped to the front door. But 8 hours later, the hill wasn't the same. I hit the brakes halfway up the street. My yard, the one I'd spent months shaping by hand, looked like a construction site after a hurricane. Deep tire tracks tore across what used to be swales. The oak tree's roots, the same tree that bowed west like it prayed at sunset, were now exposed. Hacked open, bleeding sap, the milkweed gone, the bergamot uprooted and piled like trash near the sidewalk. The signs snapped in half, flattened under bulldozer treads, and the garden wiped off the face of the earth. A man in a neon vest swept debris into a wheelbarrow like it was just another Tuesday. I jumped out of the car, heart in my throat. What the hell happened? He didn't even flinch. Landscaping job, he said. HOA work order. You the homeowner? I nodded, too stunned to speak. He pointed to the door. I turned. There it was, another letter, flapping in the wind like a victory flag. Taped above it, a crisp invoice. $5,000. Landscaping restoration. It said, in accordance with community standards. I just stood there. The smell of diesel and raw earth thick in the air. That hollow kind of anger blooming in my chest. Not hot cold, heavy, because this wasn't a mistake. This was surgical, deliberate. They hadn't just removed a garden. They had declared war officially, this time. And like all great battles, they didn't understand what they just started. The first storm hit 5 days later. At first, it was just mist, then a slow drizzle. But by the weekend, the rain came down like it had a vendetta, the kind that makes gutters overflow. That drowns the sound of your own voice. That feels personal. I sat on my porch, coffee going cold in my hands, and I watched. Watched the water roll downhill unfiltered, unbroken. Watched it carve paths where my berms used to be. Watched it turn the bare soil into rivers. And there was nothing left to stop it. No roots to hold the ground. No flowers to drink the flood. Just mud rushing, swirling, taking the slope inch by inch. Then came the first crack, not metaphorical, a real one in the sidewalk, 2 doors down in front of the Andersons' place. At first, it looked like a hairline fracture. Old concrete, maybe. But by Monday, you could fit a pencil in it. The next day, a finger, and the day after that, a shoe. Fences started leaning. Lawns tilted subtly downhill. Neighbors started posting in the HOA group chat, asking if anyone else's backyard looked off. I watched in silence because I knew exactly what was coming. I tried warning them. I pulled out every photo I'd taken of the garden before they bulldozed it. I emailed the HOA with soil reports I had saved. I called in Greg Maddox, an old college buddy turned soil engineer. He brought a probe and a grim look. You're sitting on a time bomb, he said. The rain garden had been the anchor. Now there was nothing. Just water building up between the soil layers, pushing, pressing, lubricating the clay. It wouldn't take much more. And when it went, it wouldn't stop at my yard. It would take fences, patios, lawns, foundations. I sent everything to the HOA, photos, Greg's report, a warning letter, certified, hand-delivered, uploaded, emailed, printed, you name it. I sent it, and I know they got it Because 3 days later, Karen sent out a newsletter. Bright font, smiling stock photo. Homeowners are reminded to check their gutters and downspouts to prevent drainage issues. That was it. No mention of the rain garden. No mention of the cracks. No mention of the mud pooling at the bottom of the cul-de-sac. They smiled and gaslit while the earth beneath us shifted. But nature doesn't care about newsletters. And water doesn't forget. The storm hit hard that weekend. Saturday night, I was already awake. Couldn't sleep. Something in the air felt off. Then I heard it. A deep crack, like wood snapping under pressure, but heavier, wetter. I grabbed my flashlight and ran outside. Neighbors were already standing in the rain, umbrellas forgotten, mouths open. Karen's backyard, the crown jewel of Silverwood Lane, had split open. The retaining wall that framed her garden patio had cracked clean down the middle. One side collapsed completely, spewing mud, bricks, and broken landscaping lights into the Jackson's yard below. It looked like someone had dropped her backyard into a blender, lawn furniture, hedges, decorative rock, all of it sliding. Her voice cut through the rain, sharp and desperate, yelling into her phone. Her husband stood beside her, soaked, holding a garden rake like it could stop gravity. I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. The hill was talking now. The night the hill cracked open under Karen's backyard, people started waking up, but it wasn't fast enough. The HOA, of course, didn't send out a warning, didn't call a meeting, didn't admit a damn thing. They just sent out another bulletin the next morning, same fake cheer, same deflection. Please be mindful of pooling water during rainstorms. The HOA recommends adjusting irrigation schedules and checking for low spots in your yard. No mention of the landslide. No mention of the garden they destroyed. No mention of the fact that people's homes were now physically sinking. And still, Karen smiled. She showed up at the next community meeting in a fresh blouse, lipstick on point, reading a speech about how unsightly landscaping has been corrected to maintain neighborhood values. There was actual mud sliding under her patio, and she was talking about curb appeal. I stood in the back, watching her speak, Greg's erosion report clutched in my hand. When I stepped forward to share it, she cut the mic, said the public comment period was over. The HOA board members, her clique, nodded in unison. Like bobbleheads in denial, I left without saying a word, because what could I say? The water was going to say it louder. By the second week of rain, everything started to buckle. Sidewalks tilted, lawns slumped, fences bowed like they were praying, and then the insurance letters started arriving. That's when the panic really set in, because all the damage, the cracked patios, the sinking decks, the warped foundations not covered. Why? Because the HOA had ordered the removal of a functioning erosion control system, on record, with no engineering replacement, no study, no alternative, just taste. Just Karen's opinion. The insurers called it intentional landscape alteration. Translation, not a natural disaster. Translation, you pay for it yourself. Tens of thousands of dollars in repairs, out of pocket. That's when the neighborhood turned fast. The same neighbors who used to nod along when Karen talked about dandelions ruining aesthetics, they were now holding invoices for foundation braces, repair quotes for split driveways, emails from their insurance adjusters that ended with claim denied. The Facebook group went feral. One neighbor posted before and after photos of the rain garden, lush, green, beautiful, then scorched earth after the bulldozers. Another uploaded a screenshot of Karen's email. I don't care what some dirt hippie says about erosion. That ugly patch has to go. The likes and angry reacts poured in. Flyers started appearing in mailboxes. Karen killed the hill. We're paying her price. Demand resignation. Demand accountability. And then came the emergency meeting. I'll never forget the sound of that room, the way it echoed. It was standing room only. People packed shoulder to shoulder, silent at first, then buzzing. Karen walked in with her usual poise. Same blazer, same heels, eyes forward. She tried to read a statement about miscommunication. Someone yelled, "Resign." Then it started, one after another. Neighbors stood up. "My kid's room has a crack running through the floor. My backyard is sinking. My insurance won't pay a cent because of you." And Karen. She kept trying to speak over it, but the volume only rose. She slammed her folder shut, snapped something about being attacked by a mob, stormed out without finishing. The next morning she resigned, via email. Cowardly, quiet, gone. 3 board members followed her out the door. The HOA was left like the hill leaderless, cracking, and about to cave in. And me, I wasn't done, because I had everything. The photos, the letters, the expert reports, the HOA's own rules, screenshots, statements, dates, even the invoice from the bulldozer crew. And it was time to put it in front of someone who could make it hurt, so I called a lawyer, Jennifer Cole. Sharp, quiet, reputation for tearing HOA boards limb from limb. She listened. Then she said the words I'd been waiting to hear. "This is one of the dumbest things I've ever seen a board do. Let's sue." I walked into Jennifer Cole's office with a binder so thick it looked like it needed its own zip code. She didn't flinch, just poured 2 cups of black coffee, pushed one toward me, and said, "Start from the beginning." So I did. The garden, the bulldozer, the invoice, the storm, the cracks, the collapse. She didn't interrupt once. When I finished, she tapped the edge of her cup and said, "This is gold. You're sitting on a smoking crater of negligence, fraud, and cover-ups." Then she leaned forward, calm and deadly. "We're not just going to sue the HOA, we're going to gut them." The case we built was a monster. Property destruction, negligence, breach of fiduciary duty, violation of easement and zoning protections, intentional infliction of emotional distress. And we weren't just coming for the HOA as a group. We named names. Karen Whitmore, 3 board members, the landscaping contractor, the president of the HOA management firm. Because when you bulldoze someone's land without permission, destroy an environmental system that's documented to prevent damage, and then bill them for it, that's not policy. That's war. Their response came fast and panicked. An emergency board meeting was called. This time they followed all the rules. Too late for that. They voted to hire a high-end law firm from downtown. Retainers $60,000 pulled straight from the Community Reserve Fund. Homeowners were livid. The HOA had already drained tens of thousands for repairs, inspections, temporary wall stabilization. Now they were burning more cash to defend the very act that started all this. One post in the group chat said it best: "I didn't sign up to pay legal bills for a dictator with a taste for destruction." And then discovery began. We demanded every internal email, meeting minute, expense report, and contractor record from the HOA. And oh boy, they gave us more than they realized. Turns out months before the garden was destroyed, 2 separate landscaping experts had warned the board in writing that removing it could destabilize the slope. Those reports were attached to internal emails. Karen had seen them. Her reply: "I don't care what some dirt hippie says about erosion. That ugly weed patch has got to go. We'll fix anything later." But the real bombshell: the contractor who did the demolition, Green Horizons LLC, was a brand new company, registered just 3 months before the bulldozer rolled in. Owner Matthew Whitmore, Karen's younger brother. He had filed the paperwork under his middle name. Classic shell game, no bidding process, no alternate quotes. A $20,000 job handed directly to a family member for work that should have cost 5. Straight up HOA fraud. Jennifer just stared at the documents, jaw tightening. She didn't say, "I told you so." She just said, "Let's bury them." By the time we reached the pretrial hearing, the courtroom was standing room only. People had heard, homeowners, reporters, former board members. Even a local news station posted a teaser: Rain Garden Revenge Suburban Landslide Sparks Lawsuit. And Karen, she showed up with sunglasses and a smirk, flanked by two lawyers in $1,000 suits. But when Jennifer stood up and laid out the case, the photos, the emails, the fake company, the engineer reports, that smirk slowly slid off her face. The judge, a stone-faced woman named Marissa Hayes, looked at the HOA's counsel and asked, "Are you seriously telling this court your clients authorized the destruction of a documented erosion control system against professional advice and gave the job to a board member's relative with no competitive bidding?" The room went dead quiet. The HOA lawyer stammered, tried to blame a breakdown in communication. Judge Hayes just raised an eyebrow. "You broke the hill," she said, "and now you're breaking yourselves." The hearing ended with two things. One, a green light to proceed to full trial. Two, a court order freezing the HOA's spending power to prevent them from draining more funds. Karen walked out with her head down. The rest of the board didn't follow. They were mobbed in the parking lot by homeowners, asking questions, demanding refunds, shouting. One neighbor actually read the entire invoice aloud to them, line by line. $2,000 for aesthetic cleanup. Really, that's what my cracked patio cost. And the media, oh, they feasted. Front page of the city paper, suburban erosion crisis traced to HOA overreach. Complete with before and after photos of the garden, local TV ran clips from homeowners walking across buckled lawns. One segment showed Karen's house, the new cracks in her retaining wall wrapped in emergency tarp, sagging like a defeated flag. By now, the new interim HOA board was being hounded. Questions flew. Who knew what? Why wasn't the vote public? Where did the reserve funds go? Then came the audit. One brave board member pushed it through. And guess what? More rot. Multiple payments to vendors with no tax records. A consulting company listed under a P.O. box in Arizona. Reimbursement checks written to Karen herself marked beautification support. Over $30,000 in undocumented expenses. Meanwhile, we kept building our case. Jennifer tracked down former board members. They testified under oath that Karen had shut down dissent, blocked votes, hid documents. We found receipts, contracts, bank transfers, even a text message from Karen to a board ally, saying he won't fight back. He's one of those quiet types, too soft. She had no idea who she was dealing with. Quiet doesn't mean weak. Quiet means patient. By the time the full trial date arrived, the HOA was circling the drain. 3 more resignations. A special assessment letter sent to all residents warning of pending liabilities. Property values had already dipped. No one wanted to buy into a lawsuit. Karen, she tried to sell her house, but no buyer wanted a home with a cracking foundation and a starring role in a court case. She dropped the price 5 times, then 6. Eventually, she just disappeared, moved out overnight. For sale sign leaned like it gave up. Her dream house was now a warning sign. And still the trial hadn't even begun. But when it did, everything would come out. Every lie, every dollar, every decision that turned a peaceful hillside into a legal war zone. And I was just getting started. The morning of the verdict, I wore the same boots I'd used to dig that rain garden. Call it symbolic. The courtroom was packed, not with lawyers or press this time, but with neighbors. People who once praised uniform lawns and HOA newsletters. Now they clutch folders, invoices, photos of cracked walls, broken pipes, collapsed patios. They wanted justice. Jennifer sat beside me, calm as ever. She had 20 tabs open in her binder. I had nothing in my hands. Didn't need to. Everything had already been said. On the other side of the aisle, the remnants of the HOA board sat in silence. Karen wasn't there. She had already vanished, moved out 2 weeks earlier. After her foundation split from kitchen to driveway, and 3 buyers walked mid-contract, a ghost in her own war story. Then the judge walked in, sat, read the ruling, and everything went still. We won. Full damages. The court found the HOA guilty of property destruction, negligence, breach of fiduciary duty, acting outside the scope of their authority, obstructing due process, knowingly creating an unsafe living environment. They were ordered to pay full restitution for the destroyed rain garden, cost of engineering and reconstruction, punitive damages for fraud, legal fees, community penalty for bad faith litigation, total $1.2 million. I didn't smile, but I felt my jaw unclench for the first time in months. The judge looked straight at the board's attorney and said, "This was not an accident. This was arrogance, and arrogance has a cost." The HOA's insurance refused to cover a cent, said the damage was intentional, said the board had ignored expert advice, said the fraud allegations were outside policy coverage. That left only one option, a special assessment. Every household in Silverwood Estates got a letter the next day. "Dear resident, to meet the HOA's legal obligations, a one-time assessment of $18,000 per household is now required." You could hear the screams through the neighborhood app. Some cried, some rage, some packed boxes. For sale signs popped up like mushrooms after a storm, but buyers Googled the zip code and ran. Silverwood Estates had become a cautionary tale, and Karen, no one saw her again. Someone claimed she started over in Florida. Someone else said she changed her name. But her house, it sat empty. For months, the once perfect lawn overgrown, dandelions everywhere. Eventually, someone bought it for pennies on the dollar, flipped it. But the cracks were still there, literal, symbolic, permanent. And me, I didn't rebuild the same garden. I made something bigger, better. I hired Greg and his firm. We designed a full-scale, two-tiered erosion control system, native trees, deep-rooted shrubs, double swales, engineered basins. We planted over 2,000 square feet of native vegetation. At the highest point, we installed a hand-carved stone. It reads, "Stabilizing this hill since 2025 in spite of them." The sign faces the street. Because I wanted every resident, every walker, every real estate agent to see it, to remember what they destroyed and who rebuilt it. The new HOA board came knocking eventually, apologized, offered a public statement, asked me to consult on new eco-friendly guidelines. I agreed under one condition: no more arbitrary rules, no more bulldozers, no more Karens. They passed the policy unanimously. A month later, 2 more rain gardens popped up, then 5, then a dozen. Workshops were held, engineers brought in. Even the new HOA president, Rachel, helped dig. The neighborhood had changed, less polished, more real. Instead of conformity, there was resilience. Instead of control, there was cooperation. The hill finally held, not just because of plants, but because we let go of pretending. Last week, I saw a kid plant milkweed with his mom on a corner lot. He pointed to a monarch butterfly and shouted, "Look, it's one of the garden ones." I smiled. Not bad for a weed patch. Not bad at all. So in the end, they didn't just bulldoze my rain garden. They bulldozed trust. And they learned the hard way that nature doesn't play politics. If you've ever dealt with a power-hungry HOA, you know how fast things can spiral. And if you haven't, just wait. Someone like Karen is always watching. Want more true stories where arrogance meets karma? Head on, hit subscribe to join the fight at HOA. Karen files and drop a comment below. What's the pettiest HOA rule you've ever faced? You just might be in the next episode.